George Foreman, a legendary two-time heavyweight boxing champion, an Olympic gold medalist, turned successful entrepreneur, has passed away at the age of 76. His family confirmed the heartbreaking news on March 21st, 2025, through his official Instagram account, revealing that he peacefully departed this life. Surrounded by his loved ones, as of now, no official cause of death has been released. But there is some information we will share later in the video that is interesting on this matter. The family described George as a devout preacher, a devoted husband, a loving father, and a proud grandfather and great-grandfather man who lived with unwavering faith, humility, and purpose. The announcement has sent shockwaves through the boxing world and beyond. Foreman wasn't just known for his thunderous knockout power. Inside the ring, he was admired globally for his transformation from fierce competitor to gentle giant, and for his warmth and humility. In later years, while fans mourn the loss, many are taking time to reflect on the powerful legacy he leaves behind. Foreman's story was one of the most extraordinary in sports history, from his Olympic gold medal win in 1968 to becoming heavyweight champion by demolishing Joe Frazier to losing to Muhammad Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle, and later shocking the world with a historic comeback to win the title again at age 45. His journey captivated millions beyond the ring. He became a household name with the George Foreman Grill, a product that has sold over 100 million units and made him a cultural icon. Major outlets, including ABC, ESPN, and People magazine, have confirmed his death. Putting to rest any past rumors or confusion, tributes have been pouring in from around the world. Boxers, athletes, celebrities, and fans alike are remembering the kindness, wisdom, and charisma of Big George as we await official memorial announcements. One thing is already clear. George Foreman's presence was larger than life, and his impact will be felt for generations to come. George Foreman was born on January 10th, 1949 in Marshall, Texas, and raised in Houston's notoriously tough Fifth Ward, growing up in poverty. George often found himself on the wrong side of trouble. By his own admission, he was a mean kid, constantly fighting skipping school and heading down a dark path. But everything changed when he joined the Job Corps program and was introduced to boxing. That decision would completely transform his life. Within a few short years, Foreman's natural power and aggression in the ring turned him into a rising star in the amateur boxing scene. At just 19 years old, Foreman won the gold medal in the heavyweight division at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics, defeating Jonas Chepelis of the Soviet Union. It wasn't just the win that made headlines. It was the moment after the fight when Foreman, beaming with pride, waved a tiny American flag in the center of the ring. That image captured hearts across the country and marked the beginning of a legend. In 1969, Foreman turned professional and wasted no time making an impact. He bulldozed through opponent after opponent with frightening ease, racking up an undefeated 32-0 record. By 1971, his fearsome punching power earned him a reputation as the most dangerous man in boxing. In 1973, Foreman stepped into the ring with the undefeated heavyweight champion, Joe Frazier. Frazier had just come off his historic victory over Muhammad Ali and was expected to be a tough challenge. But Foreman shocked the world in a brutal display of raw power. He knocked Frazier down 6 times in just 2 rounds before the referee waved it off. The broadcast featured the now legendary words of Howard Cosell, yelling down, "Goes Frazier." With that devastating victory, George Foreman became the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. At the time, he looked nearly unbeatable. But just a year later, In 1974, everything changed. Again. Foreman traveled to Sayre for the iconic Rumble in the Jungle, where he faced Muhammad Ali in one of boxing's most famous bouts. Foreman entered the ring as the favorite. But Ali had a strategy. He used his now famous rope-a-dope technique, letting Foreman tire himself out before unleashing a furious counterattack in the 8th round that ended the fight. Ali handed Foreman his first professional loss in a shocking upset. It wasn't just a defeat in the ring. It was a personal and spiritual turning point after struggling to find his footing. In the following years, Foreman stepped away from boxing in 1977, the 8th. But his exit was not simply about losing interest in the sport. During a fight against Jimmy Young, Foreman suffered from exhaustion and heat stroke. After the match in the locker room, Foreman claimed he had a near-death experience, one that left him begging for his life and committing himself to God. He called it a religious awakening. From that moment forward, George Foreman became an ordained Christian minister. He opened the George Foreman Youth and Community Center in Houston's Aldine district and dedicated his life to preaching, mentoring young people, and spreading the message of redemption for 10 years. He stayed out of the ring and focused entirely on his faith and family. But George wasn't done just yet. In the late 1980s, nearly a decade after his first retirement, Foreman stunned the sports world by announcing his comeback, now over 40 heavier and with a completely different public persona. More friendly preacher than angry brawler. Foreman began a second act that no one saw coming. Most people thought he was just looking for attention or trying to cash in on nostalgia, but fight after fight, Foreman proved the doubters wrong. He kept winning the comeback, reached its incredible peak on November 5th, 1994. At the age of 45, Foreman stepped into the ring with 26-year-old Michael Moorer, the reigning heavyweight champion. Moorer was younger, faster, and the heavy favorite for 9 rounds. It looked like Foreman's age had finally caught up to him. But in the 10th round, George unleashed a devastating right hand that flattened Moorer and ended the fight with that single punch. Foreman became the oldest heavyweight champion in history, reclaiming the title 20 years after first winning it. It was more than just a win. It was a moment that transcended sports people around the world, watched in awe as the 45-year-old preacher in red trunks raised his arms in victory. He had done the impossible. He had defied time after a few more fights. Foreman finally retired for good. In 1997, at the age of 48, he left behind a professional record of 76 wins, 5 losses, and an astonishing 68 knockouts. It was a Hall of Fame career that spanned across 3 different decades, bridging generations of fans. But for George Foreman, greatness wasn't limited to the ring. In 1994, the same year he won back the heavyweight crown, Foreman entered a new arena business. He became the face of a new product, a countertop fat-reducing grilling machine that would soon become a cultural phenomenon, the George Foreman Grill. His smiling face and warm voice were everywhere. Commercials, infomercials, store displays. What made it special was not just the product, but the man behind it. People trusted George. His transformation from a fearsome bruiser to a lovable father figure was complete, and consumers welcomed him into their kitchens. The grill became a smash hit, selling over 100 million units worldwide, and changing the way America cooked in a rare move. Foreman was given a substantial cut of the profits, and in 1999, he sold the rights to use his name for a reported $138 million. By that point, he had earned more from the grill than he ever did from boxing. It was one of the most successful athlete-to-entrepreneur transitions in history. But even with all the fame and fortune, Foreman never strayed from his core values. He continued preaching, mentoring youth, and giving back to his community. He wrote books, shared his story, and even participated in light-hearted media appearances, including a surprise role on The Masked Singer in 2022. And in 2023, his extraordinary life was honored in the biopic Big George Foreman, which brought his story to a whole new generation. When asked later in life what title meant the most to him, Champion Entrepreneur Celebrity, Foreman always gave the same answer. Reverend, that was the title he carried with the most pride. From Olympic glory to boxing immortality, from personal redemption to entrepreneurial genius, George Foreman's life was nothing short of epic. He didn't just win titles, he won over hearts. And long before he passed, he had already become something greater than a legend. He became an example, a living testament to the power of second chances. Faith and transformation news of George Foreman's death spread quickly, and within hours the sports world and beyond were in collective mourning. For many, the idea that someone like Big George could be gone didn't quite feel real. Tributes began pouring in across social media platforms from all corners of the world. On Foreman's official Instagram, where his family shared the heartfelt news of his passing, the comment section quickly filled with messages of love, respect, and gratitude. His story wasn't just known, it was deeply personal to millions. People recounted how Foreman had inspired them, not just as a boxer, but as a symbol of faith and second chances. The announcement itself was deeply moving. In their own words, the Foreman family described George as a devout preacher, a devoted husband and a loving father, grandfather and great-grandfather. They said he lived a life of unwavering faith, humility and purpose. It was the kind of statement that reflected the quiet dignity with which Foreman carried himself. In his later years, he wasn't just remembered for what he did. He was remembered for who he became. Major news outlets followed suit. ESPN called Foreman one of the most influential and recognizable boxers of all time. Local Houston coverage painted a touching picture of one of the city's greatest icons, someone who never forgot where he came from. As tributes continued, it became increasingly clear that this loss went far beyond the boxing community. Still, for those who knew him, from the ring, the grief hit especially hard. Among the first to speak publicly was Mike Tyson. The former heavyweight champion, known for his ferocity, shared a quiet, heartfelt message condolences to George Foreman's family. His contribution to boxing and beyond will never be forgotten. That sentiment was echoed by dozens of fighters, young and old. Bob Arum, the legendary boxing promoter, called Foreman one of the biggest punchers and personalities the sport has ever seen. He didn't just lose a fighter, he lost a friend. Arum spoke about Foreman with reverence, recalling not only his strength in the ring, but his strength of character. Younger fighters and fans posted highlight reels of Foreman's greatest knockouts, those thunderous blows that made him a champion, but many also reflected on his comeback for them. Foreman's return to boxing in his 40s wasn't just a sporting feat. It was a message that it's never too late to rise again. That failure isn't the end, and that even in a world obsessed with youth experience and wisdom, still have their place. For many, Foreman was proof that redemption is real. The World Boxing Council and other major organizations issued official statements celebrating his career and legacy. Some fighters wrote personal posts about how Foreman's example had guided their own careers. One rising heavyweight said, "I studied his comeback more than his prime. He taught me to believe in myself when the world stops believing. That was the kind of impact George Foreman had. Not just greatness, but enduring influence. But boxing wasn't the only world. Remembering him, Foreman's crossover appeal made him a household name. Tributes began pouring in from other sports entertainment and business communities. Magic Johnson, the NBA legend, and entrepreneur shared a heartfelt message he wrote. I was really sad to hear the news. George was a knockout artist in the ring, and it was a pleasure getting to know him. As a man after leaving the ring, he turned into an amazing businessman. I even bought one of the first George Foreman grills. His message perfectly captured the duality of Foreman, ferocious and friendly, relentless and kind. Scottie Pippen, another Hall of Famer, kept it simple. Your Legacy Lives On, champ Lonnie Love comedian and TV host, perhaps said it best: the champ has gone bigger than life. In more ways than one, George Foreman captivated the hearts and minds of sports fans and found a place on the kitchen counter of many homes that was George Foreman, a 2-time heavyweight champion, an author, a minister. And yes, a familiar face in our kitchens, he was larger than life, and somehow still managed to feel like someone you knew. Sports commentator Skip Bayless called him a giant of a man in every way, as feared a boxer as ever there was then, as beloved a pitchman as ever sold a product. Such a rare human. The tributes weren't just about his fists or his fortune. They were about his heart, his laughter, and his ability to connect people. Shared stories of meeting Foreman in airports, churches, or grocery stores. The theme was always the same. He was gracious, generous, and genuinely happy to meet people. One fan wrote, "He shook my hand and asked about my mother. He made me feel like I mattered." The messages weren't limited to celebrities and athletes. Former U.S. presidents, world leaders, CEOs, and pastors. Weighed in one former president released a statement thanking Foreman for his contributions to American sports business and community outreach. Another mentioned how Foreman's faith and story of redemption had inspired his own life from local gyms in Houston to corporate boardrooms in New York. People were honoring a man who wore many titles and carried them all with pride. What stood out in all of these tributes was the consistency of admiration, whether it came from the boxing ring, the church pulpit, or a TV soundstage. Everyone seemed to agree. George Foreman was one of a kind. He lived more than one life. He was more than a champion. He was more than a millionaire. He was a man who found peace and then shared it. Even his most successful product, the George Foreman Grill, was mentioned with fondness not just as a piece of cookware, but as a symbol of his ability to reinvent himself. Millions of homes had won families remembered their first burgers on the grill, or watching George smile on late-night infomercials. It wasn't just about convenience. It was about connection, part of people's everyday lives. And that connection now feels like a loss, but also a legacy, as tributes continue to pour in. It's clear that George Foreman's story didn't end with his death. It lives on in every person he inspired, from fans who watched him rise again at 45, to kids in his youth center in Houston, to families who bought his grill because they trusted his name. Foreman didn't just fight opponents, he fought to be better. He didn't just win titles, he won over the world. And now, as the world says goodbye, we're reminded of what made him truly great. Not just the gold medal, not just the belts, but the way he carried his spirit, humble, strong, and full of faith. That's the George Foreman the world will remember, and that's the George Foreman whose legacy will live on at this time. No official memorial services or funeral arrangements for George Foreman have been publicly announced. The Foreman family has asked for privacy as they grieve, requesting that fans and supporters allow them the space to honour what they described as the extraordinary life of their beloved George. In peace, still there is little doubt that in the coming days and weeks, multiple opportunities will emerge for the world to celebrate the man who meant so much to so many. Given Foreman's deep roots in Houston, a private funeral or church service is expected to take place for close family and friends as an associate pastor at the Church of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's likely that his congregation will hold a special service in his memory, reflecting on his deep faith and years of spiritual service. Those who knew Foreman outside the ring often described him as Reverend Foreman, first, and Champion second. Public tributes are also anticipated in Houston, the city where Foreman was a local hero and tireless philanthropist. The community center he founded may host events where residents can pay their respects, and a larger memorial, possibly at a stadium or arena, could be held to accommodate the city's overwhelming admiration. Local officials have already praised his lifelong commitment to empowering youth and serving the community. The boxing world is preparing its own tributes at upcoming major fight events. A solemn 10-bell salute will likely honor Foreman in traditional fashion. The International Boxing Hall of Fame, where he was inducted in 2003, is expected to commemorate his legacy in their next ceremony. Promoters, fellow fighters, and former opponents are also discussing ways to pay tribute from dedicated events to entire cards named in his honor. Meanwhile, media outlets like ESPN and HBO are airing tribute segments, replaying Foreman's iconic fights, and showcasing documentaries about his remarkable journey around the world. Fans are leaving flowers, personal letters, and even George Foreman grills at gyms and statues. It's a touching, sometimes light-hearted way of honoring a man who lived, large, laughed often, and left behind a legacy that's truly unforgettable.